Right guys, welcome back to another exam practice video. Today we're going to be looking at paper 3, and more specifically we're going to be looking at free will and determinism, which for anyone taking the 2022 exam series is an in-focus topic. In this video I've got 6 exam questions on determinism. All the questions have been taken directly from past papers, so whilst there are a couple that are technically a little bit more research methods based, they still have a determinism focus because they've appeared in the issues and debates section of various paper 3s. On the screen now you can see the questions that I've got. Question 5 is the only question that hasn't been taken from a past paper, but that's just because this particular question hasn't been asked yet, so I've chucked it in the video just in case. As always, you can pause the video before I reveal any model answers and have a go at answering the questions yourself, which is always good practice. And before we get started, if you find this video useful, a like would be amazing. Alright, let's jump right in. So here's my first question. Now, the scientific emphasis on causal relationships is something that threw people when it was first mentioned on the advanced information. But it simply means that science tries to determine cause and effect. That's all it is. Deterministic approaches are in line with science because deterministic approaches claim that all events have a cause that can be determined, whether that cause is internal or external. So, the question wants you to see that the study being carried out is a controlled study, which means that the researcher can infer cause and effect. So, you could write something like this. So because the researcher is controlling all of his variables, he can assume that the change in the dV was due to the IV, and not due to anything else. The 3 highlighted bits are the bits that are mentioned on the mark scheme as what would be credited. The first line is just a little bit of an intro that I decided to do. Okay? But the scientific emphasis on causal explanations literally just means that I can be fairly certain that the change in the dV was down to the IV, and that is something that scientific approaches, deterministic approaches, focus on. Okay? So, here is question 2. This is more of a standard question. Explain what is meant by determinism and then apply it. So there are 2 marks for explaining what determinism is, and then another 2 marks for referring to Joel in the STEM. Now at the time, the examiner's report said that most students were able to explain determinism, although a couple of the explanations were a bit repetitive and wordy, and that students generally did well on biological determinism and applying it to Joel, but not so much on environmental or psychic determinism. Okay, so in my answer, I've focused on environmental determinism just because that's one that the examiner said people struggled with. Okay, so this is what I wrote. In red, you can see my 2 marks for explaining what determinism is, and then in green you can see my application bits. Notice that keywords that link to environmental determinism, such as role models and reinforcement, come up in the application bit. Now, obviously, if you wanted to do a biological determinism application, you could talk about perhaps the genetic role of aggression. You could talk about the fact that maybe all of the brothers share similar genetics in some way, or maybe there's some kind of neurotransmitter imbalance, something like that. If you have done the aggression topic, then that might be the way that you want to go. It's totally up to you. I just went this way because it was the bit that apparently people struggled on last time. Okay, so that was question 2. So moving on, question 3 is specifically about psychic determinism. Now, really importantly here, make sure that you make links to the psychodynamic approach. It's important if you want to access the marks. The STEM is full of psychodynamic content, especially in terms of psychosexual development, because if you read it, and the way I see it, Johnny has experienced a problem in pretty much every stage of psychosexual development except the phallic stage. So you've got quite a lot to play with. When you write your answer, make sure you refer to Johnny in everything that you write, because there are 4 marks of AO2 here. Okay, so application is the key. Things to focus on here are the fact that he chooses pen all the time, he spends hours tidying his desk, the fact that he finds it difficult to make friends, and the fact that he's never had a girlfriend. Okay, you don't need to focus on all of them. 2 of them is fine, but they're the things really where it's easy to make the links. So this is what I wrote. As you can see, I've mainly gone for a focus on the psychosexual stages because, like I said, it's the easy way to go, and I've focused specifically on the oral and the anal stages. But there was a lot that you could have said. Like I said earlier, the main thing here is to ensure that you've talked about the psychodynamic approach and that you've linked it to Johnny's behaviour and how it's controlled. I've also started off with a little bit of an introduction as to what psychic determinism is, but again, even that is linked to Johnny in some way. Okay? Okay, and this is the final short answer question before we have a look at the essays. So, this is a little bit of research methods, but it has a determinism focus because it came up in the issues and debates section of a paper 3. So it's all about paradigm shifts and what they are. The reason it came up in paper 3 is because in the question they're focusing on the fact that psychology has shifted between determinism and free will over the years. And so has experienced a paradigm shift in that sense. It's worth noting as well that this question was not answered very well at the time, with a lot of students seeming quite unprepared for the question and most answers not going above 1 or 2 marks. Okay, so make sure you know what a paradigm is and what a paradigm shift is as well. So, let's take a look. The 4 colours denote the 4 marks that you would get. Start by explaining what a paradigm is, and then move on to a paradigm shift, and make sure you apply as often as you can. Examiners were specifically looking out for words like scientific revolution or that kind of thing, which I used in my purple section because I referred to a cognitive revolution in the 70s. Okay? Okay, and here is my first essay. It's a standard style essay that you might get on free will and determinism. As you can see in the question, you're being asked to refer to topics that you've covered, and that is fairly standard in issues and debates essays because you need the examples to flesh out what you're saying. The thing is with this type of essay is that very often it's an application essay, even though it's not made 100% clear all the time. So the fact that you're being asked to refer to 2 topics that you've studied in psychology suggests that you're going to get marks for doing that. So keep that in mind when you're planning and writing this answer. So this is what I'm going to do. My outline is very standard. I'm going to start with the debate, explaining what is meant by both sides in some detail, and then I'm going to go into the different types of determinism. I'm going to get my 4 marks of application by talking about schizophrenia and phobias. You don't have to do that. There's loads that you can mention, but that's just what I've chosen. And then I've got my evaluation points. Now, it's worth mentioning here as well that I've included more evaluation points than I would actually need, but you can chop out any evaluation points that you want. Remember, 2 or 3 evaluation points is plenty for an application essay, and 3 or 4 is plenty for a standard essay. Okay, you've got 4 evaluation points in there, so just get rid of any that you don't want to use. Okay, and let's have a look at what this essay would look like. So, as you can see, I have woven my application into my outline wherever it made sense to do so. So, for example, directly after talking about biological determinism, I mentioned schizophrenia, the genetic side of schizophrenia, and also the dopamine hypothesis. And directly after environmental determinism, I talked about phobias, classical conditioning, and operant conditioning. Like I said before, you could easily have talked about other things. It's completely your call. You've covered so much content over the 2 years that anything really, if it's got a biological base or if it's got an environmental base or even a psychic base, could have made its way into this essay. Don't forget, you can also talk about the humanistic approach as part of free will, would also have been completely fine. I've then got my evaluation points. In orange, I've got a counterpoint, and then in purple, I have a discussion point. I'll admit my evaluation section is slightly biased towards determinism, but I do still have 2 points for each. I think my determinism points are possibly slightly longer, but it doesn't really matter. I've still got enough of both to access all the marks. Okay, and then let's have a look at the final essay. This one might look familiar to some of you if you've had a look at some past papers from the last couple of years. It's another 16-mark essay and another application question. This time it's a more traditional question with a very, very obvious stem. Be aware, though, that the question for this essay asks you to focus specifically on determinism. There's no mention of free will at all. It's discuss 2 or more types of determinism. So, while you can use free will in your evaluation section a bit if you want, as limitations of determinism, your outline should focus solely on determinism. Okay? And like it says, 2 or more, I would probably go for more than 2 because there's quite a lot that you could say, whereas you might struggle to get the full 150 words, 160 words, give or take, if you only focus on 2. But it is completely your call. If you can fill up your outline only talking about 2 types of determinism, that is also fine. Okay, so here is my plan. I've got almost the same outline as I had for my previous essay. I've obviously cut out the free will bits, but other than that, I've kept it with determinism, hard and soft, and then the distinctions of hard determinism. I've then got my application, so I'm going to focus on biological determinism as the cause of musical talent, and then I've got some environmental determinism as an alternative cause for musical talent. And then I've got the same evaluation points as I used before, and the same goes, as I said before, take any of the evaluation points that you don't like and get rid of them, and just keep the ones that you do like. Or keep all of them. It's up to you. But you've got a nice choice there of evaluation points that you can use. Okay, and then let's have a look at this final essay. So there's my outline. As you can see, it focuses only on determinism, so all mention of free will has been got rid of. My application focuses on environmental and biological determinism. I could have mentioned psychic determinism if I wanted to, but realistically the other 2 were easier to talk about in this particular instance. And then I've got my evaluation points from before. Okay, like I said, it's okay to use a bit of free will in your evaluations because you're challenging the idea of determinism. But obviously you can get rid of any evaluation points that you want. Right, and that brings us to the end of the video. I hope it's been useful. Keep practicing your writing. It's the key to being confident in the exam. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the comment section below and I'll do my best to get back to you ASAP. Thanks for listening. I hope it's all made sense. And I will see you in the next one.